Gahahaha! At this point, you already know what's going on. We're back with yet another Rance video. Today, we're looking at not one, but two Rance games, Rance 4.1 and 4.2. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the retro timeline, but don't worry, we'll get into all of that. But real quick, if at any point you think I'm doing a good job, please do leave a like and subscribe for more content. It really does help me out. Also, Twitter and Discord are in the description, and consider checking out Patreon for your name in every video and early access to future content. Alright, enough of that. So as always, I do have to give a quick disclaimer before we go any further. Rance is a series that features adult encounters of the non-willing variety. If references to that will seriously upset you, this may not be the video for you. Also, like my other Rance videos, to appease the almighty algorithm, I'll be referring to those events as a struggle snuggle. Okay, so those of you who are familiar with my channel but haven't played through the Rance series might have been a tiny bit confused when you first saw the video. As you know by now, my videos trend towards the long side, and the Rance games have only been getting more and more dense as the series goes on. So you may be wondering why this video is so short, especially since I'm covering two entire games. Well, that's because Rance 4.1 and 4.2 aren't really full Rance games. They're basically just side stories that take place after the events of Rance 4. They're much shorter than the full games, I got through both in under 5 hours combined, and their stories are much less impactful to the overarching story of Rance and the characters contained within. So not only is there less game for me to talk about, but the story contained within is a lot less dense than even the first two games, which are pretty much isolated stories in their own right. These games were meant to be fun little diversions that would make both the developers and fans happy. And for those of you not already in the know, the entire retro series of Rance games up to Kichiko Rance, including 4.1 and 4.2, are available for free because Alisoft are incredibly based. So without any further ado, let's get into the games. I'm going to treat these games as one entity for the purpose of this video, with just one gameplay section and one story section, because the gameplay of 4.1 and 4.2 are nearly identical, and the stories are basically two arcs to the same plot. While story stuff will be covered later, the important thing to note early on is that this is a story focusing on Rance and Athena 2.0, the optional character you could recruit in Rance 4. None of the other main heroines join the party, and even Syl has less than 5 minutes of screen time in total. This is very much Athena 2.0's time in the spotlight. So with that, let's get into gameplay. As is Rance tradition, a new game equals a new combat system. The 4.X games have a party versus party turn-based combat system, not entirely unlike the JRPG standard. Much like Rance 02, you control Rance while the AI controls the rest of your party. If you're playing on the fan-made 2.0 patch of these games, there's actually an option to enable manual control of your party, which makes the game significantly easier. Though to be fair, the games are already pretty easy, and I personally had no issues with letting the AI do its thing. There are two different stats that function as life points, more or less. There's the actual life points. If they drop to 0, that character outright dies. If any member of your party dies, it's game over. The other stat is stamina, and this works sort of like how a shield meter would work in other games. Most of the damage you deal and take will go to stamina, though some will also do life damage. When stamina drops to 0, that character will become unconscious, where they'll not be able to do anything, and any damage they take will directly deal life damage. The goal of each combat is simple: kill or knock out all enemies without letting any of your party members die. The game works on a modified ATB system where each character will raise their power level over time, and each action costs some of that power. It's still turn-based, but each turn kinda just happens whenever each character has enough power to do the thing they want. Rance can use his standard attack for 10 power, though you can also use the standby command to skip your turn to build up for the 30 power Rance attack, which like all previous games, hits very hard. Your party members will each have their own unique stats and quirks. For example, Athena 2.0 doesn't hit quite as hard and has a pretty low max life, but her max stamina is off the charts, and she'll occasionally do a special move that deals significant damage directly to an enemy's life. She also has a chance to heal herself for free when her life is low. Or Genri, who has fairly high defenses and a decent attack stat, who can also reduce enemy combat stats and restore his own health and stamina. Also, his AI amusingly prioritizes attacking unconscious enemies, which is partly a funny character quirk since he's a Buddhist monk, but also affects your own strategy. Do you want to avoid knocking out an enemy so he won't basically waste his turn on a downed enemy? It's up to you. But as I said earlier, the combat in this game is very easy, and realistically, you shouldn't find yourself having any trouble no matter what you do. Also, in 4.1 you have the ability to summon Felis, the devil bound to Rance's servitude. Like previous games, she is exceptionally powerful, though you can only use her 10 times throughout the course of the game, and you can't use her at all in 4.2. Now, a lot of the systems you'd find in other RPGs are stripped down or entirely removed from 4.X. As mentioned earlier, these are basically quick little side games that Alisoft quickly pumped out. For starters, there's no money system, so you can't actually go out and buy anything. This means that equipment upgrades are also pretty much non-existent, though there is a way to upgrade your sword in 4.1, which is nice but entirely unnecessary. It also means that stamina and life restoration items are finite. Once you use them all up, they're gone, though I found that they give you more than enough, so it's not really a concern. It's also worth noting that these are the first Rance games where leveling is not done via the level goddess, but instead happens automatically as soon as a character reaches 100 experience points. In fact, you can't access the level goddess at all in these games. But yeah, a lot of the gameplay of these games is very bare bones, and if you go in expecting something on the level of the other Rance games, you'll be sorely disappointed. Exploration works very similarly to Rance 2. Each of the games will have a primary dungeon with rooms and corridors. You'll have to work your way through, finding your way past various obstacles and solving basic puzzles in order to reach some sort of goal. Your progress will be mapped out by Athena 2.0 as you explore, and let me just say that the map is not only very functional, but very charming. Athena draws all these little doodles on the map to reference different things you come across, and it's absolutely adorable. As you explore, you may randomly come across enemies, though the encounter rate is pretty low, especially compared to other JRPGs of the time. As you explore, you'll trigger event flags and come across landmarks that can be interacted with. Most of these interactions will just give usually amusing flavor text, but sometimes you'll need to use certain interactions in order to progress the game, such as looting an item you'll need later. It's all pretty standard stuff, and I actually liked it for the most part, though it was pretty slow to move from room to room, which sucked when backtracking. It ultimately felt like a more polished version of Rance 2's exploration. And like the previous games, the dialogue system works as a set of options when interacting with someone. You can observe them, talk to them, ask questions, and usually you'll have another option or two that leads to a bit of funny dialogue. For example, there's a grope boobs option with Athena, and most of the male characters you meet will have a hit or kick option where Rance will just beat the shit out of them for no reason. Like the other games, the dialogue is mostly meant as a means to give the player funny shit to laugh at while they search for the bit that'll let them move on in the story. I'm really trying my best to find more things to talk about as far as gameplay, but there isn't really all that much there. It's exceptionally simple and fun enough. There aren't really any glaring flaws, but there's also not anything particularly special going on. Again, even put together, 4.X is not comparable to a mainline Rance game, so instead of dragging it out, I think I'm just gonna move on. So now, let's talk story. As you might expect, that means spoilers up ahead. You have been warned. But here's the thing, the story in this game really doesn't matter in a meta sense. The story is very simple, most of the twists are so unsubtly foreshadowed that you're probably meant to figure them out. And there's almost no impact here on the lore and world building of the Rance universe, or at least nothing that can't be done in a few lines of dialogue in a future game. So I honestly don't feel like spoilers are really an issue here. Also, I won't be going through each and every plot point since most of the individual events are basically just filler. So here's a very quick plot summary. Rance accepts a job from a pharmaceutical company that makes all the healing items. Monsters are being summoned in the factory, and whoever is able to deal with the problem will gain a cool 150,000 gold. Rance takes Athena 2.0 with him and leaves Syl behind to take care of the house. There are a few other people trying to solve this issue as well. There's Genri, the Buddhist monk, a small girl named Arnie, and a duo consisting of a woman named Kisara and none other than Bird, who's the guy who tried to seduce Syl back in the second game. Stuff happens, and it's revealed that the monsters are the result of a gal monster known as Summon-chan, who was put there by the Angel Army, who are basically eco-terrorists who are opposed to the adventurers killing monsters for gold and experience and have basically declared war on the pharmaceutical company. Rance is helped a bit by a superhero who goes by Pink Mask, who's very obviously just Syl. Arnie turns out to be a traitor sent by the Angel Army, Rance cucks the ever-loving shit out of Bird, and he's able to drive away the Summon-chan and capture one of the officers in the Angel Army. The president then offers him more money to stop the Angel Army once and for all, and that's 4.1. In 4.2, Rance and Athena are joined by Genri, who's clearly just there to have a good time, and Kisara, who Rance had successfully seduced through deception. Rance is able to do some struggle-snuggle-based torture to get information, and the group makes its way through the Angel Army's base. They take out the assassins sent to kill them and discover that the reason the Angel Army has declared war is because the company had kidnapped Wenlina, one of the Holy Gal monsters, though it turns out that one of the researchers did this behind the president's back. They rescue her and also run into Sailor, Blazer, and Jumper, 3 fun Galmons from Rance 4 who Rance had struggle-snuggled. Really nice to see them again. They're fun. Rance is eventually actually killed, though Wenlina revives him as thanks. The party takes out the assassins sent to kill them and eventually apprehends the boss, Archibald, who turns out to be Genri's brother. Then Rance collects his money and everything goes back to normal. Okay, so that's the basic plot. As I said, it's pretty simple stuff and it's pretty straightforward as well. I know that my whole thing is talking at length about story and writing, but by design, there's not all that much here to pick apart. So I want to touch on a few aspects of the games that I feel are noteworthy. So I'm going to talk about Rance himself, Athena 2.0, Genri the Monk, Bird and Kisara, and the little amount of world building that actually does exist in the game, though not in that order. So let's start out with the world building. There isn't really all that much there, but there are 2 things I definitely hope get expanded on in future games. The first is the Angel Army. The existence of these radical soldiers who fight on behalf of the monsters is a really neat idea for future conflicts, especially since Rance has properly established himself as their enemy. So far, most of the antagonists have either been political or supernatural in nature, and the main series of conflicts seems to be trending towards a geopolitical thing. And given what little I know about both Kichuko Rance and Rance 10, I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. But the Angel Army could prove to be a nice thorn in Rance's side as a consistent thing. It could amount to nothing, but it could end up being really awesome. The other thing they introduced is the idea of holy gal monsters. Now, we'd already seen plenty of standard gal monsters as well as rare gal monsters who are very strong and seem to have more intelligence. The implementation of holy gal monsters could be game-changing, and the fact that they were all named and referenced in 4.2 suggests that they may be used in the future. And these creatures are basically on the level of gods. When Lena, the holy galmon of life, is even shown to be able to bring someone back to life, though she does have to rest for a year afterwards. That's pretty huge, and I think it's a safe assumption that the others have comparable levels of power. So I really hope this comes back in the future. Next, let's talk about Athena 2.0. So back in Rance 4, she was an optional character you could recruit through a side quest. She's a humanoid robot developed by the witch Frostvine, who was gifted to Rance after he helps obtain the final ingredients for her creation. Now, since you could actually complete the game without obtaining her, she really didn't have all that much of a feature outside of a few isolated scenes and a small bit of dialogue. But here in 4.X, we actually get to see her in her full glory. She has two main personality traits. She has a childlike excitability and optimism, and she's really fucking stupid. Like, take Rance's proclivity for dumb fuckery and turn it up a notch. She's just dumb. Now here's the thing. My favorite girl in the series so far is Syl, and it's been that way since I played the first game. But Athena 2.0 makes a very compelling case for herself. I absolutely adore her, and she makes every scene more fun. She also manages to have an incredible level of chemistry with Rance that doesn't quite line up with Syl's, but I think it surpasses all the other heroines in the series so far. I really can't do it justice by just talking about it, but Athena and Rance have phenomenal banter, and I find that their unique styles of stupid play really well off of each other. For example, here's a joke that actually made me physically laugh. At one point in 4.1, you're given a think option, and since Rance is a total drama queen, he makes a big show of it, grunting and scrunching up his face to show how hard he's thinking. So out of nowhere, Athena just asks him, "Do you have to poop?" And I just lost my fucking shit at that point. Add on the fact that she's able to find joy in just about everything, like how she pretended to be a cockroach when they had to climb up a pile of garbage. It serves as such a great foil to how pretty much everything pisses Rance off. I know I already said it, but I can't do this justice. The games are free, and since they're so short, there's really no reason not to check them out for yourself. Genri is another very interesting character, and I honestly don't know if he's a one-off or if he'll be a consistent figure moving forward. Honestly, I feel like he could fit either way. So as I mentioned earlier, he's a Buddhist monk. Now, if you don't know anything about Buddhism in the real world, its practitioners tend to be all about peace, discipline, and kindness. Genri is none of those things. In fact, he shares a lot in common with Rance himself. He wants to fuck cute girls, he's just kinda in it for the fun, and his moral compass is a bit skewed. Like, I already mentioned that he prioritizes killing enemies who can't fight back, which I still find funny. But what's interesting about him is not really the character itself, but his dynamic with Rance. See, on the surface, there are two things about him that stand out. Firstly, he seems to be exactly the kind of person Rance believes himself to be. Powerful combatant, massive cock, and very skilled in bed. Secondly, his attitude and personality are exactly the kind of thing that should gel really well with Rance. He's exceptionally cavalier, has no issues with struggle snuggling, and it's clear that he actually likes and respects Rance. But Rance fucking hates the dude, constantly putting him down and actively doing his best to keep him from fucking anyone. Now, that's probably the result of the fact that Rance just hates all men who aren't him, but I found that this whole interaction with Genri to be very amusing. It's expectation subversion, but done in a very subtle way. You'd expect them to be homies like Rance and Millie were in the second and third game, but no, Rance just treats him like shit and it's hilarious. So now let's talk Bird and Kisara. So for those of you who don't remember, back in the second game there was a segment where Bird and Syl teamed up together after Syl and Rance were separated. He attempted to seduce her, she shot him down, and Rance developed even more of a hatred for him than he has of most men. Now, Bird is basically a comedic foil to Rance. Since Rance is a parody of fantasy RPGs, Bird is actually more emblematic of a traditional fantasy RPG hero, where he acts all chivalrous and honorable, kinda like how we romanticize medieval European knights. But here, this person who's clearly coded like a hero is a soft antagonist, which plays into the absurdity factor of the series as a whole. And I will say that the writers did a great job of taking this person who is admittedly flawed but is ultimately a good person on an objective level and making it so we, the audience, just can't fucking stand him. It's genuinely impressive. So that made it funny during the scene where Rance goes full NTR on his ass. So there's a point where Bird and Kisara are trapped in the dungeon and they start preparing to do the diddly. Rance is having none of that, and he had already pledged to steal Kisara away from him, so he has Athena stealthily knock Bird out while he blindfolds Kisara and has Athena imitate Bird's voice. So then Rance goes on to be the worst to her. He's super rough, spares no care for her well-being, gets way kinkier than she can handle considering it's her first time, and all the while he just does everything in his power to make her think that Bird is basically Rance. It is such a brutal cucking scene, and at this point I just don't expect anything less. After the waterboarding scene in Rance 01, nothing really surprises me at this point. This is one of those scenes that I feel is probably going to be iconic for me going forward. I just don't see this one leaving my mind anytime soon. So the last thing I want to talk about is Rance himself. Now I have to reiterate something I said back in my Rance 3 video. In the more modern games, Rance has somewhat mellowed out compared to how he was back in the PC 98 titles. Still a piece of shit, but a lot less brutal than he was. And from Rance 02 to Rance 4, I was starting to notice that shift where we were seeing more twinges of humanity within Rance here and there, and once in a while you'd see instances of Rance actually draws a line. But in Rance 4.X, that's just thrown out the fucking window. And amusingly, in the staff comments section, one of them says he actually recommends 4.X to people who were upset that Rance was getting nicer. So I described Rance as basically the extreme end of chaotic neutral. Total piece of shit who does whatever he wants, but everything it does is ultimately for personal gratification rather than specifically to hurt others. But here, oh boy, he can be quite cruel at times. There's the cucking scene I talked about earlier. There's the multiple scenes where he sexually tortures that officer for information where by design he has to be as cruel as possible. And side note, Athena 2.0 pounds and whines because she wants to help with the torture and Rance won't let her. I fucking love it. And then there's the scene where he ties up a Galmon in such a way that guarantees that she'll be struggle snuggled by any man or monster that comes across, or where he sets up the gang struggle snuggling by one of the Angel Army officers by her own men. It's all just so fucking brutal in a way that we really haven't seen at least in the last 2 games. And don't get me wrong, everything is still comedic and cartoonish, it never takes a real serious tone. This isn't something that I can really convey properly secondhand, so you're just gonna have to trust me on this or just try out the games for yourself. I was just struck by how much more of a dick Rance is than usual. It's also worth noting that the writing in general seems to be much more absurdist than before. This might partially be due to the fact that very little in the way of proper large-scale narrative happens, but there are a lot of very odd dialogues and options throughout the game. Of course, that's a staple of the series, but it seems to be turned up a bit. Nothing unusual about them, just regular-ass stairs. They have an eat option, where Rance will say he's a good boy who isn't picky, but even he can't eat stairs. The fuck? Or you can have Rance try to attack the sun, which goes about as well as you'd expect. Or there's one woman named Silbarrow who Rance just refers to as ugly. If you use the check option on her, the entire screen will fill up with copies of her sprite and Rance will be traumatized because he looked directly at the ugly. Now, I always recommend exhausting the dialogue in Rance games as much as possible since it's funny and that's kind of the point of playing a Rance game, but that goes double for 4.X. These games are so ridiculous and it puts the others to absolute shame. What it lacks in proper narrative, complex character work, and lore, it makes up for in fun factor. So in conclusion, Rance 4.1 and 4.2 are exactly what they advertise themselves as. Dumb fun to tide the fans over after Rance 4. These are the first games that I'd actually say are not mandatory if you're trying to experience the series from start to end. However, I'd still recommend picking them up and trying them out. For starters, like the rest of the retro timeline, they're fucking free, so there's no real excuse. The gameplay itself is very simplistic, but not all that bad. I actually wouldn't mind playing a more fleshed out version of the combat system for a full game. And even though the writing doesn't really hold up next to the rest of the series overall, it's still a fun time. And hey, you can get through these games in a day, so it's not like you have to drop a ton of time into it. I'd say pick them up and try them out for yourself. Now, I know some of you may be disappointed by this admittedly lackluster video. Honestly, this is probably the least excited I've been to make a Rance video. But of course, the next title I'll be taking on is the one and only Kichikuo Rance, the finale to the retro timeline and a game that I've been told is one of the best the 90s has to offer. I do want to finish the Octopath Traveler video I'm working on, as well as the upcoming English release of Evan Equal 2 first, but rest assured, Kichikuo Rance is not far off. Get hyped. Thanks for watching. Big thank you to my patrons, especially my God tier supporters Bulk Squat Thrust, Michael Rotolo, Drago, and Fatima. I appreciate everything you guys do. If you want to join them and get a shout out in every video alongside early access to future content, consider checking out Patreon linked below. Follow me on Twitter at AdsTweets and join my Discord for some good times. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Gahaha!